Hello again. As you know, I'm Eli the Computer Guy, and today's class is adding hard drives and creating volumes in Windows Server 2012. So whenever you're dealing with servers, you're most likely going to have to be able to add hard drives to those servers and be able to create volumes so that you can store data for the client computers on the network. So with most client computers, if you're dealing with Windows 7 or Windows 8 or Windows XP, generally you put in the one hard drive, you install the operating system, you install the software, and your My Docs and whatever just sit there on that one single hard drive. It's pretty simple, pretty easy, no big deal. You can do some pretty cool configurations with these client operating systems hard drives, but at the end of the day, nobody really ever does because, hey, it's a Windows 7 desktop computer. You probably don't care enough. Well, once you start dealing with servers, remember, servers are storing data for the entire network. So now you are not storing data for a single user. You may be storing data for 100 users, 1,000 users. Hopefully not 10,000 users or more, but you could. You may have to be able to store lots and lots of data for different users, and so you will have to be able to install additional hard drives and then configure them so that they can store all of that data. So with many servers, when I had my computer repair shop a couple of years ago, we had one server with 12 1 terabyte hard drives. Now that's not a lot by today's standards, but it was 3 years ago. So having a server that had 12 terabytes of storage was a big deal. But nowadays, you are going to run into the same issue where you may be using 2 terabyte hard drives or 3 terabyte hard drives, but you're going to have to add those hard drives to the server to make that server be able to store all of the data that you needed to store. One of the nice things that they have with the servers nowadays and with Windows Server 2012 is that we have a lot more flexibility with our hard drives so that we can swap hard drives in a live system and we don't have to do migrations like we used to. So long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, if you created a partition on a server in order to store data, if you needed to add additional hard drives to that partition. So let's say you created a 4 terabyte partition, which 6 years ago seemed like an amazing amount of storage space, but then that all filled up and you wanted to add an additional terabyte to that partition, it was very difficult to do. You would most likely have to pull the data off, basically recreate that partition, create an entirely new partition, and then put the data back on again. Or you may have to go out and use some expensive third-party software. Well, now with Windows Server 2012, with what is built into it, with the functionality that's built into it, you can now expand and shrink volumes basically on command. You just hit shrink, and it'll shrink. If you hit expand, it'll hit expand. So now, instead of having to go through a horrible, tedious, nasty routine in order to add hard drive space to your server, you can literally put in a new hard drive, you can extend the current partition, the current volume onto that hard drive, and then you can go home and you can get sleep and you can be with your corgis or your wife or whatever else. It makes life a lot easier. Now the big thing when you are going to be dealing with server hard drives and volumes and data is to make sure that you are very, 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 very careful. Remember, when you're dealing with your desktop computer, even if you do something catastrophically stupid, you can probably fix it, right? If you're dealing with your desktop computer and you do something really colossally just dumb, the fact is, if you put enough time and energy into it, you can most likely fix your screw up. When you're dealing with servers, that's not necessarily so. If you make a very, very small mistake with your volumes or drives or any of that, you can just devastate all of that data and make it you simply cannot repair it. So the one thing is, whenever you're dealing with drives, volumes, partitions, so on and so forth, on servers, is always be very careful. Always make sure you know what you're doing. And the big thing in a production environment is make sure you always have a recent backup, the most recent backup possible on hand. So if you totally trash all the data, you're only making your life miserable for a day or so. You're not losing all of that data for a company. You really do have to be careful about this. I've seen this in the real world. One of the problems when you have PC repair technicians that start to go into the server world, they figure, hey, you know, a Windows 8 computer, I know how to fix that, so I can probably fix a Windows Server 2012 box. Well, one of the places they get into major troubles is they start messing with the partitions, the volume, so on and so forth, and they just make a hash of everything. So be careful. As I'm showing you here in my little lab environment, what I would suggest for you guys is that make sure to create your own little lab. Make sure that you're playing with Windows Server 2012, and in your lab, add drives, create volumes, play around with it in the lab environment so you get used to it, so that when you go out in the real world, it's not a shock to you. Again, the big problem with hard drives and volumes and all that is a single click or 2 or 3 clicks, and you can cause an incredible amount of damage just that quick. So the system that I'm going to be showing you today, again, I'm using the same virtual setup that I've been using for all of the classes in this track. So I've got Windows 8, VirtualBox on that, and then all of my instances. So I'm going to show you how to add virtual hard drives to this virtual server that I've created within VirtualBox. Now, if you are dealing with a physical server, life is actually easier for you, because all you would do, instead of creating these virtual hard drives, you would just take a physical hard drive, you would put it into the physical server, and then you would go on from there. The one warning that I will give you, if you are dealing with servers in the real world, is many times they disable hard drive controllers that are not currently being used. So if you put in a new hard drive, you boot up Windows Server 2012 and it does not detect the hard drive, what that means is the hard drive has been disabled in BIOS. So you need to shut the server down, reboot it, go into the BIOS setup utility, and then figure out how to turn on the hard drive controller from there. So that's the warning I will give you. So with that, let's go over to the computer now, because a lot of this is just going to be demonstrations, so I might as well actually just start showing you how all this stuff works. So here we are. This is my Windows 8 computer with VirtualBox installed on it, and over here, these are all the instances of the operating systems that I play with to show you demonstrations. Now we're going to go down here, and this is the new file server that I created in the last class, and we are going to be playing with this more and more. So this is simply a Windows Server 2012 server that's been added to the Active Directory domain of etcg. But basically, this is just a plain old simple server. The one thing that I want you to notice, especially if you're dealing with a virtual environment, is where it says here powered off. So we are going to go into settings now and add these virtual hard drives. Make sure you have properly shut down the 2012 server before you start doing this. This does not mean put it into hibernate. This does not mean put it into standby. Make sure you have shut down the server properly so that you'll be able to add the hard drives and they will be detected properly when you turn the server on. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to right click, and then we're going to go up to settings. So this will give us the settings for this particular server. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go down to storage, and this gives us the storage configurations for this particular virtual server. The first, of course, is the IDE controller, and this controls the optical drives, or as we can see, there's an ISO file in there now. So we are not going to mess with this. What we want to go down to is we are going to go down to the SATA controller, the virtual SATA controller, and we can see that there's one virtual hard drive there already. So this is the system disk. This is the drive that we created in order to install the server operating system. But what we want to do is we want to add a number of new virtual drives. So we need to highlight the controller. Make sure you highlight the controller. And then all the way over here on this whole platter thingy, what we're going to do is we're going to hit the plus this. So this is going to add a hard disk. So it's going to add a virtual hard disk. It's going to ask, what do we want to do? Do we want to choose an existing hard disk or do we want to create a new one? So for this, what we're going to do is we're going to do create a new one. We do new, just leave it at VDI, next, leave it at dynamic, next. I would say leave it at 25 gigs. And then I'm just going to call this disk 1 and then hit create. And then what we're going to do is I'm just going to keep doing this just so I can create 4 disks so I can show you guys how this works. Disk 2. Disk 3. And disk 4. So depending on what configurations you want to do, you may want to change these sizes, you may want to do a whole bunch of stuff. But again, simply for this demonstration today, all I cared about was just creating 4 new hard drives. So these are the equivalent, I want you guys to understand, these are the equivalent of 4 new physical hard drives. Not partitions, not volumes. These are physical hard drives as far as this server is concerned. And then we're going to say OK. And then I'm going to double click on the file server to boot it up. So now as it boots up, it will detect those hard drives as new hard drives into the system. Again, just like if you slotted new physical hard drives into a physical server. So now we wait for Windows Server 2012 to boot up. It's booting. While it's doing this, it's going through its little routine, so it'll detect new hardware and all of that. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to do Control-Alt-Delete to log in. And now we get to the normal Windows Server 2012. Now you'll notice here that we're not getting any new alerts. We're not being told any new hardware has been installed or any of that. One of the things I want to show you is when you add these new hard drives to a server, if we go down to File Explorer, I want you to understand that the volumes don't exist yet. So if we look at computer, we're going to see that the C drive exists, and we can see that that fake optical drive exists. But even though we installed 4 new hard drives, they're not here. Well, the reason they're not here is because they are not volumes yet. They have not been added to the system. So although it's like they're here, the server knows that the drives are connected to the server, but they haven't been created as volumes, they haven't been turned into volumes, so they're not showing up here in the File Explorer. So what we're going to do is we're going to exit out of this, and we're going to go to Server Manager. Again, Server Manager is the main hub for where we do almost all the administrations for a server. And we're going to go up to Tools, and then we're going to go to Computer Management. So if you've been using Windows operating systems for a while, you know that Computer Management is like the big tool. It's where a lot of the really useful utilities that we use are. So here at Computer Management, then what we're going to do is we are going to go down, and under Storage, we are going to go to Disk Management. So when we go to Disk Management, it's going to look for those new hard drives that have been installed onto the computer. And now what it's going to ask is, do we want to initialize these disks? So disk 1, disk 2, disk 3, disk 4. So basically, do we want to start using those for the system? Now, I would just leave these checkbox. I mean, I suppose there's a reason you might not want to initialize them, but just assume that you're almost always going to want to initialize them. So leave these as they are. But then the question down here is, do you want them to be a master boot record MBR or a GPT, GUID partition? Now this is very, very important, the decision you make here. I would say you should always go with GPT, partition table now. The reason for this is that GPT can deal with volumes above 2 terabytes in size. So if you're going to create a volume above 2 terabytes in size, I would suggest you go with a GPT partition table. MBR does not support partitions above 2 terabytes in size, so that can be a big problem in the modern world. Actually, it's not partitions, volumes above 2 terabytes in size. Can't deal with volumes above 2 terabytes in size. So if you format or if you initialize these disks, and let's say they're 10 terabytes in size, if you initialize them as MBR, MBR will only recognize 2 terabytes worth. Now, the reason you might want to go with MBR is because GPT is not recognized by any other Windows operating system before Windows Server 2012. So Server 2003, Server 2008, Server 2000 will not understand a GPT partition table. But that doesn't really matter, because these drives will be shared over the network generally. And so if you have a 2003 server that maps a drive to this 2012 server, none of this here is actually going to matter. That's not part of that process. So I would just say just go with GPT unless you have a reason not to, especially with these modern hard drives. So initialize them as GPT. So there we're going to do is we're going to do okay. So now we can go and we can look at that. So we have 4 new hard drives on the computer. Now, even though we've initialized them though, if we go back to File Explorer, we're going to see there's nothing here because we still have not created any volumes. So what we can do is if we want to create a volume we're going to click in this open space here on any of these disks, and we can right click, and from here we can get the option for different types of volumes that we want to create. So a new simple volume basically means the old-fashioned partition. So if you want just a simple partition on this hard drive, you would create a new simple volume. Spanned volume is the type of volume I actually prefer for Windows 2012 environments. This is a really cool type of volume. What this means is you can span the volume across numerous different hard drives. So, as I showed you here, if we have 4 hard drives on this system, we can span our volume across all 4 of those. So basically, the server will be writing data on the first one. When it gets to the end of the first hard drive, it will automatically just start writing the data on the second hard drive till it gets to the end, and then goes to the third, and then goes to the fourth. So basically, the server sees all of those hard drives as one single big hard drive. So it writes beginning to end on the first, beginning to end on the second, beginning to end on the third, beginning to end on the fourth. That is actually the one I prefer, because again, as we go down, we can see that we have the options for RAID. So we have striped volume, mirrored volume, or RAID 5 volume. These are the normal RAID, striped, mirrored, RAID 5. Again, I just don't like RAID. Having played with this stuff in the real world, I really dislike RAID. I would much prefer having a good backup system, to be honest with you. One warning that I will give you is if you are in a virtual environment, please do not actually try to do RAID. So if you're dealing with a physical server right now, you have Windows Server 2012 installed on a physical box, by all means, if you like RAID, by all means, you can set up RAID. If you are in a virtual machine, I played with this before the class today, and you try to set up RAID on virtual hard drives, basically everything's going to go to hell really quick. It kind of just crashes everything and it gets nasty, I guess simply because it's virtual hard drives, and like, why are you doing RAID on virtual hard drives type of thing. So if you're in a virtual environment, I would just say don't play with the RAID, because at least in my experience, it will crash. If you're dealing with a physical server, play with RAID all of you want. So then, what I'm going to do then is I will right click and I'm going to create a new span volume. Again, spanned volume is what I prefer. So all we're going to do is we're going to go through a little routine here. So it's going to say, what disks do you want to add to the span volume? So we have disk 1 already added. So I'll add disk 2, disk 3, and disk 4. So these are all of these disks are approximately 25 gigs in size. And then what we're going to do, going to click next. Then it's going to ask what drive letter do we want to give. So we can give whatever drive letter we want. So K. We're going to click next. How do we want to format? So basically we can give it a volume name here. The big thing is that I would suggest you do the perform a quick format. Doing perform a quick format will make your life a lot easier. Because it'll format these drives much quicker. If you have large hard drives, again 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, 3 terabyte hard drives, and you do a full format, that is going to take absolutely forever. I would suggest you do a quick format. You do have the option for file system. We're not going to go into that today. We might do that in a different advanced class. I would suggest you leave it at NTFS. And then for the enable file and folder compression, I would leave that unchecked. But again, that's one of those things, as you learn more about servers, you can decide whether or not you want to do. And then what we're going to do is we're going to click next and then finish. Now what you're going to see is for these drives, in order to do this, it's going to say that it needs to convert the hard drives that you created from basic disks to dynamic disks. So, what you need to understand about basic disks and dynamic disks are basic disks were the old way for the operating system to deal with hard drives on the computer. So basically you could create 4 partitions and that was about all you could do. So a basic disk is a basic disk. All you can do essentially with that hard drive is you can create 4 partitions. That's it. You can't do a RAID, you can't do span volumes, you can't shrink, you can't extend, you can't do anything fun and nice and neat. You can just create 4 partitions. They came out with dynamic disks actually back in Windows Server 2000, so this has been around for a long time. With dynamic disks, if you convert a disk to a dynamic disk, you now get a whole bunch more functionality. You can use those dynamic disks for span volumes, for RAID, you can extend dynamic disks, you can shrink dynamic disks, you can do a lot of fancy, nifty, neato stuff with them. At this point in time, I guess way in the past there was a reason to leave disks as basic disks instead of making them dynamic. Now in 2013, I don't know. Maybe one of you guys knows that there's a downside between a dynamic disk and a basic disk, but I would suggest just always convert to dynamic. It will be good for you. So all we're going to do then is click yes. And now it's going to go through and it's going to create the volume using these 4 drives. So disk 1, disk 2, disk 3, and disk 4 we can see are now volume K, and they're healthy. And you can see disk 1 volume K, disk 2 volume K, disk 3, disk 4, they are all volume K. Now if we go down to File Explorer, we can see volume K. Right? This is the new drive, so it now shows up. And we can also see it's a spanned volume. So now we see that we have 99.3 gigs in that particular spanned drive. So it was 4 25 gig hard drives combined together to create one big hard drive. Now, that's really all there is to creating a new volume. Now, what I like with Windows Server 2012 is you also get the ability to either shrink or extend these volumes. So I can even go to the C volume. If I right click from here, it gives me the ability to shrink that volume. So I actually already turned the disk 0, the system disk, into a dynamic disk. I had simply right-clicked it before and there was an option to turn it into a dynamic disk. And now I can go and I can shrink the system volume. So I can shrink it. So all that'll happen is I right-click, I do shrink, and it says enter the amount of space you want to shrink by. So I will say, let's say 17, almost 18 gigs there. And then I hit shrink. And it's going to go through and it will actually shrink that volume that quickly. And this is nice. This is the system volume. I was able to do that. And then now I have this unallocated space. So I could turn this into a new simple volume or whatever I wanted to do with it. If I want to extend, I can just right click. I can do extend. I can do next. I can do next. I can do finish. And now it's been extended. So I can shrink the volume or I can make it larger. Why this becomes really important in the server environment is this is nice just for the C drive, just for the system drive. If you're a system admin, it is just really, really nice to be able to futz around with the C drive if you need to. But why this can be really important in the server world is, again, imagine that you have a physical server and it only has so many bays for hard drives. So right now you put in, let's say you have 5 bays and you put in 5 1 terabyte hard drives. Now all that space gets taken up. And so the question is what can you do in order to add hard drives? Well, the cool part is you can use this shrink and extend. So you can actually shrink a volume. And let's say I want to shrink this by 40. So I'll shrink it. And when I shrink it, you'll notice that one of the hard drives is now no longer used at all. So this is, let's say, the hard drive that's too small. So I could literally then pull this hard drive out of the system. I could take a new, much larger hard drive, slot it into the system. I then right click on that volume I want to extend. I do extend volume. Next, I would then add that new hard drive. And now it will get extended. So this is one of the really, really nice, nifty, neat features is as your server needs more and more hard drive space, you can use extend and shrink to very slowly be able to swap out new hard drives to make your life easier. So this is the basic things that you have to understand in order to start playing with hard drives and volumes in the Windows Server 2012 environment. Again, there's more stuff that you can play with, as always, that you can get much more complicated, but this is the basic concepts. So you're going to add your hard drives to the server. When you add them, you're not going to actually be able to use them yet. You have to go into Server Manager, Tools, Computer Management, Disk Management, and that is where you'll be able to initialize them and create the different volumes. Again, remember, I would say to use that GPT partitioning when you're going to be dealing with these hard drives, because that understands volumes larger than 2 terabytes in size. Again, if you use MBR, Master Boot Record, that's the old version, and it can only detect up to 2 terabytes of storage space. So if you use that, you're just going to run into all kinds of problems. I showed you how to create the volumes. I showed you how to shrink the volumes. Again, there's basic disks and dynamic disks. Again, basic disks are the old types of disks, the old types way of dealing with hard drives, where you could create 4 partitions, and that's it. That's all you can do. Dynamic disks allows you to do spanning, allows you to do RAID, allows you to extend, allows you to shrink, allows you to do all of those fancy, neat features. Again, my personal Eli advice is I like using spanned volumes on servers. I don't like using RAID. Again, it's just me. I don't know. I'm a RAID hater. I think you should have a really, really good backup system. And if spanned drives are not enough, we're going to show you how to do replication and stuff over multiple servers. I would prefer to do something like that than doing RAID. RAID's its own little weird mess. The one thing that I will tell you, especially for the newbies here, as far as RAID is concerned, is if you do decide to use RAID on your Windows Server 2012 server, remember you're only going to be able to use RAID on those data drives. You can't use RAID on the system drive. It's an important thing to remember that a lot of people don't realize. So the system drive you cannot use RAID on. You can't use RAID because it is software RAID, right? So what that means is that if your operating system crashes or if that one C drive fails, Everything else still fails. Everything else, you still can't get to it. It's only for the data drives. If you want to use RAID, and also to protect your operating system, your system volume, then you need to use hardware RAID, and you need to go out and you need to buy an expensive hardware RAID controller and deal with all that mess. So it's just one of those things to keep in mind. And again, also with RAID, the big warning that it will give you, if you're dealing with a virtual box environment, don't try to do RAID. It crashes everything and just makes a hash of everything. So if you want to play with RAID, make sure you're not doing it in a virtual environment. Make sure you do it with an actual physical server. And if you do that, you should be pretty good. So this class was adding hard drives and creating volumes in Windows Server 2012. As you know, I'm Eli the Computer Guy. I enjoy teaching this class. I look forward to seeing the next one.